In the quiet moments of self-reflection, we often confront the dissonance between the truths we yearn for and the comforting illusions we've embraced. Carl Jung, the eminent Swiss psychiatrist, delved deep into this internal conflict, emphasizing the journey towards individuation, the process of becoming one's true self. This journey necessitates shedding the layers of falsehoods and societal expectations that have been internalized over time. Jung believed that true freedom is not found in external circumstances, but within the depths of our psyche. He stated, "Our freedom does not lie outside us, but within us. One can be bound outside, and yet one will still feel free, since one has burst inner bonds." This inner liberation requires confronting the shadow, the repressed, often uncomfortable aspects of ourselves. By acknowledging and integrating these facets, we move closer to authenticity. The path to self-realization is fraught with challenges. It demands the courage to face our deepest fears and the humility to accept our imperfections. As Jung aptly noted, one does not become enlightened by imagining figures of light, but by making the darkness conscious. This enlightenment is not a destination, but a continuous process of self-discovery and growth. Embracing this journey means relinquishing the comfort of lies, the narratives we've constructed to shield ourselves from pain and uncertainty. It involves questioning long-held beliefs, challenging societal norms, and daring to live authentically. In doing so, we may face isolation or misunderstanding, but we also open ourselves to profound self-awareness and genuine connections. Ultimately, the pursuit of freedom is an act of courage. It is a commitment to living truthfully, even when the truth is uncomfortable. By letting go of comforting illusions, we create space for genuine growth, deeper understanding, and a life aligned with our true selves. In the words of Jung, who looks outside dreams, who looks inside awakes. Awakening to our inner truths may be daunting, but it is the only path to true freedom. And in that awakening, the illusions begin to die. Not all at once, but quietly, painfully, truth by truth. The lie that you must be agreeable to be loved. The lie that success is measured by external applause. The lie that fitting in is safer than standing alone. These lies dissolve under the heat of awareness, and what's left is you. Raw, unfiltered, uncompromising. The freedom you sought wasn't behind locked doors. It was buried under the mask you were taught to wear, beneath every performance, every silent compromise, every time you chose peace over truth. But now, you choose differently, not to be accepted, but to be integrated, not to be impressive, but to be whole. This is where power begins. Not the kind that dominates, but the kind that radiates, the kind that comes from a man or woman who has nothing left to hide, because they faced the abyss and didn't flinch. They've kissed their shadow and called it sacred. They've sacrificed comfort for clarity. And what they found was not emptiness, but essence. That is the real cost of freedom. You lose the lies, and in doing so, you find your life. And when you find your life, not the one scripted for you, not the one expected of you, but the life that pulses from your core, you stop asking for permission. You stop explaining your choices to people still living behind veils. You stop shrinking to soothe their fears or performing to sustain their illusions. Because now you know, truth doesn't scream. It radiates. It doesn't demand agreement. It simply is. And from that place, you begin to attract a different kind of world. One where conversations aren't measured by convenience, but by courage. Where love isn't a contract of silence, but a covenant of presence. Where work isn't a treadmill, but an offering of your soul. Every false thing you let die. Make space for something real to live. And it won't always be comfortable. Truth rarely is. But comfort was never the goal. Freedom was. And freedom, true, radical, soul-deep freedom, comes only when you burn the script. When you look yourself in the eye and say, no more pretending, no more hiding, no more lies dressed as safety, because you are no longer willing to pay that price. You have paid enough. Now you rise, unmasked, unmoved, unmistakably you. And from this rising, a new life begins. Not a life without pain, but a life where pain has meaning. Not a life without challenge, but a life where every challenge refines you rather than defines you. You will lose people, but you will never lose yourself again. You will walk alone, but never in betrayal of your soul. You will be misunderstood, but clarity will become your compass. Because now you live by a different law. Not the law of conformity, but of consciousness. Not the law of approval, but of alignment. You don't chase truth anymore. You embody it, and that embodiment will cost you everything that was never really yours. The roles, the masks, the applause, gone, but in their place, a deeper peace, a wilder joy, a stillness that cannot be shaken. You are not here to be palatable. You are here to be liberated. You are here to awaken others simply by refusing to sleep again. So let them call you too much, too honest, too raw, too real. That's how you'll know you're free. Because freedom has never looked like a smile. It's looked like a fire, like a storm, like a soul, remembering who it is after lifetimes of forgetting. This is not the end. This is the arrival. Welcome back to your life. Welcome back to the truth. And now that you're here, fully, finally, irrevocably here, you realize the world hasn't changed. You're no longer asking the world to understand you. You're asking yourself, every day, will I understand me deeper today than I did yesterday? Because that's the only way forward now. Not through more information, but through initiation. Through the daily descent into your own psyche. Through the honest conversations with your resistance. Through the discipline of choosing what is real over what is familiar. This is the journey of the awakened, the fierce, sacred rebellion of those who no longer outsource their identity to systems built on their sedation. And you are one of them now. Not because you read it in a book, but because you bled for it. You wept for it. You walked through fire for it. The lies didn't leave easily. They clung, they begged, they masqueraded as kindness, as duty, as love. But you saw through it. You chose truth anyway. And for that, you will never be the same. So carry this freedom like a torch, not to burn the world, but to illuminate it. Let your life be the proof that living without lies is not only possible, but powerful beyond measure. You are not free because you escaped. You are free because you refuse to pretend a moment longer. And now, the truth walks with you, always. It walks beside you in silence. It echoes in your actions. It hums in the rhythm of your decisions, even when no one is watching, especially then. You no longer crave the spotlight because your soul burns with a quieter flame, one that doesn't flicker for attention, but roars with conviction. You don't explain your freedom to those who fear it. You live it unapologetically, because to explain it would be to reduce it, and to reduce it would be to betray it. The people who are meant to meet you in this fire, they will. Not all at once, but in time, because truth recognizes itself in others. It pulls them in, not with persuasion, but with presence. And that's what you've become. A presence, a reminder, a mirror, a storm, and a stillness. You've stopped playing roles. You've stopped asking for costumes. You've stopped looking for stages, because the performance is over. And the real you, the wild, raw, radiant, relentless you, has stepped forward, not as a reaction, but as a revelation. This is not about rebellion for rebellion's sake. This is about remembrance. You are not free because the world gave you permission. You are free because you reclaimed your name, the one whispered into your spirit, long before the world told you who to be. Now, you answer only to that voice. And in doing so, you become untouchable, not invincible, but indomitable. Because truth doesn't guarantee ease. It guarantees power. And you are finally ready to wield it. Because the one who has reclaimed their truth is no longer afraid to walk alone. Not because they prefer solitude, but because they understand truth is a path walked by the few, but felt by the many. And when you walk it long enough, others begin to follow, not because you asked them to, but because they saw the weight you carried, the illusions you broke, the light you refused to dim. They saw you bleed and not beg. They saw you fall and not fold. They saw you die to the lie and rise into something terrifyingly alive. You didn't tell them what truth was. You embodied it. And that was enough. Because now your presence speaks louder than any sermon. Now your eyes say more than any doctrine. Now your silence disrupts entire narratives. You've become the contradiction to a culture obsessed with comfort. You've become the medicine for a world addicted to numbness, not by force, but by fierce being. You are no longer seduced by survival. You are no longer convinced that peace is found in pretending. You've discovered a peace born from burning everything false and standing in the ashes without flinching. And if there's one thing you know now, with a clarity carved from fire, it's this: freedom is not a destination. It's a daily death and a daily resurrection. And you die to the lie every single day so that the truth can live through you. That is your power. That is your legacy. That is the price you've paid and the prize you've become, because now you are the storm that doesn't destroy, but awakens. The presence that doesn't dominate, but liberates. You are the one who walks into rooms and shifts the air, not because of what you say, but because of what you no longer tolerate. You no longer tolerate self-betrayal. You no longer tolerate the cheap highs of approval. You no longer tolerate the shallow narratives that kept generations asleep, because you are not here to play small, to keep others comfortable. You are not here to conform, to dim, to shrink. You are here to rupture the lie of what is normal. And you rupture it not through rebellion, but through rootedness, not through anger, but through alignment. You don't scream to be heard. You whisper with unwavering calm. and the world still leans in. You don't argue for your worth. You embody it. And that is what unsettles the most. Because when a person stops needing to be chosen, they become unchainable. When they stop seeking permission, they become untouchable. When they stop fearing solitude, they become unbreakable. And that's what you are now. You've become the thing the system can't predict. The man no longer ruled by impulse. The woman no longer ruled by guilt. The soul no longer ruled by fear. You walk this world with ancient fire in your bones and silence on your lips, because truth doesn't perform. It permeates. And you are permeating everything now. You are no longer a participant in the performance. You are the pause that breaks it. You are no longer the actor in the play. You are the fire that burns the script. And this is the true revolution. Not waged in streets, but in the psyche. Not broadcast on screens, but unfolding in sacred, silent moments of choice. You chose truth over comfort. You chose clarity over chaos. You chose yourself over the self the world told you to be. And in doing so, you didn't become better. You became real. You became the one they whisper about, the one they don't understand, but cannot ignore, the one who left the path, walked through shadow, and came back whole. Because you know now, freedom was never about doing what you want. It was about unbecoming everything you're not, and standing rooted, clear, unshakable in what remains. You are what remains. The truth that survived, the flame that didn't go out, the soul that said yes to the fire and no to the lie. You are not here to fit in. You are here to transcend. And the world, whether it knows it yet or not, has already started to change. Because you finally stopped pretending. And now that the pretending is over, you breathe differently. You walk differently. You exist differently. There's a weight that's gone. The weight of needing to be liked. The weight of pleasing everyone but yourself. The weight of smiling while suffocating. And what fills its place is not arrogance, but authority. Not noise, but knowing. Not control, but command. You command your space, your voice, your destiny. Because when a person remembers who they are, truly remembers, they don't beg for belonging. They create it. They don't adjust their truth to be palatable. They speak it like thunder and let it shake loose everything not built to last. And now that you become this, not a version, but the vision, you no longer chase validation because you validate yourself with every breath you take. And make no mistake, this level of presence, it costs everything that was ever false about you. But what you gain in return is everything real. Love that doesn't clip your wings. Work that doesn't drain your soul. Silence that doesn't suffocate. Power that doesn't corrupt. Because the person you become doesn't need to manipulate to lead, or dominate to be strong, or suffer to be worthy. You just are. And in a world addicted to becoming, to proving, improving, hustling, hiding, your very existence is the loudest revolution. Because when you arrive as yourself, unmasked, unafraid, unedited, you become the standard that shatters every false expectation. Not because you rebel for its own sake, but because your truth refuses to kneel. You walk into rooms and bring permission with you, not through words, but through presence. You remind people what freedom feels like, just by being unwilling to abandon your own. And yes, they may not understand it. Some will resist it. Some will call it arrogance. Call it selfish. Call it too much. But that's how it's always been. Every soul that's ever truly awakened has looked mad. To the ones still dreaming, let them call you whatever they want. You no longer live by their labels. You live by light, by integrity, by the quiet burning fire of alignment that asks nothing from the world except the space to be. You didn't come this far to dim. You didn't break chains just to trade them for softer ones. You didn't bleed truth just to settle for comfort again. You came to live, and now here you are. And that is more than enough. That is sacred. That is untouchable. That is the final liberation. When you realize you were never meant to be understood. You were meant to be felt. And now, as the world feels you in ways it can't explain, but will never forget, because the man or woman who walks in truth leaves an imprint deeper than memory. They leave a resonance, a frequency that moves the hidden parts of others, that stirs the sleeping truths in their bones, that calls the fragmented self back into wholeness. And this is the legacy you leave behind. Not a monument built from noise, but a presence carved from silence. Not an empire built from control, but a kingdom forged from inner mastery. You are not here to be followed. You are here to awaken. You are not here to gather crowds. You are here to gather yourself. And when you do, fully, fiercely, finally, you become the thing this world forgot it needed. A soul who is not for sale. You've seen what it costs to belong by betrayal. You've seen what it costs to climb by pretending. You've seen what it costs to be chosen while abandoning yourself. And you've said, never again. Because now you would rather walk alone in truth than be loved in a lie. You would rather be misunderstood in authenticity than applauded in performance. You would rather lose what was never real than hold on to what slowly kills your spirit. This is the end of that old life and the beginning of something sacred, something sovereign, something unshakably yours. So if you walk away from this with nothing else, walk away with this. You don't need more to become whole. You just need less of what was never you. And once you shed that, once you burn it, you will remember you've been free all along. You just forgot beneath the weight of what you were told to be. Now, you remember. And the world, it will never be the same again. Because when one soul remembers, truly remembers, it becomes a spark. And sparks ignite fires. Not the kind that destroy, but the kind that purify. The kind that melt the masks. The kind that light the path back to self. And though this path may be walked in solitude, you are never alone. Because every step you take in truth echoes into the collective. Every time you choose authenticity over acceptance, a chain breaks in someone watching. Every time you choose presence over performance, a mirror appears in someone's darkness. This is how revolutions are born, not in loud declarations, but in silent courage. Not in systems toppling, but in selves awakening. You are the beginning of that, a living contradiction to every narrative that says you have to earn your worth, chase your peace, sacrifice your soul for love. You say no to all of it, not out of rebellion, but out of remembrance. Because you remember now, you were born enough. You were born free. You were born whole. And anything that told you otherwise was never love. It was control dressed in comfort. It was fear wearing a friendly face. It was safety that cost your aliveness, but not anymore. Because now you choose differently. You choose you again and again and again until that choice isn't a rebellion, but a rhythm, not a fight, but a frequency. And in that frequency, you find peace, you find power, you find home. So now you walk forward, not with certainty in what lies ahead, but with conviction in who you've become. You no longer ask the world to be softer. You have become stronger. You no longer ask the world to see you. You see yourself. And that is everything. You've learned that leadership doesn't mean domination. Presence doesn't mean noise. Love doesn't mean sacrifice. And freedom, real, soul-ripping, heart-awakening freedom, doesn't come wrapped in comfort. It comes when you finally say, I choose myself. Not the illusion of me, but the deepest, truest, fiercest version I buried to survive. You exhume that version. You rise with it. You live it. Because in the end, this world doesn't need another copy. It needs your original fire. It needs your truth, your voice, your gaze, your scars, your soul, unhidden, unashamed, unapologetic. And if you've made it this far, if your heart is still beating and your spine still standing, you are not broken. You are becoming. So breathe deep, walk proud, and remember, you were never here to fit in. You were here to wake the world up. Most marriages become silent prisons because they are built upon the illusion of connection, not the reality of it. They are forged in the fires of expectation, not the crucible of understanding. They are sustained by the inertia of routine, not the vitality of shared growth. In these unions, partners become strangers, bound not by love but by obligation, not by intimacy but by proximity. The silence that pervades these relationships is not peaceful. It is deafening, a testament to the emotional chasm that has widened over time. It is in this silence that the true nature of the prison is revealed, not one of bars and walls, but of unmet needs, unspoken words, and unrealized selves. Because at the altar we promise forever, but rarely do we promise truth. And truth, unvarnished and raw, is the only foundation love can survive on. Not the sugar-coated confessions, not the performative affection posted on social media, not the stale rituals repeated year after year like a lifeless script, but truth, the kind that breaks illusions before it breaks your spirit. The truth that most people never speak because they don't even whisper it to themselves. That they married not a person, but a projection, an echo of their unmet childhood longings, stitched together with hope and denial. And over time, the projection fades, the mask falls, the fairy tale rots, and what's left standing across from you at the dinner table is not your soulmate. It's a mirror, a living, breathing mirror showing you everything you were too afraid to face within yourself. This is why the kitchen grows quieter, why sex becomes negotiation, why laughter feels forced and small talk replaces soul talk. Because when you spend a decade avoiding the truth, intimacy dies. Not suddenly, but by suffocation. 1,000 unsaid sentences, 1,000 moments you swallowed your truth to keep the peace, 1,000 nights lying next to someone, feeling lonelier than you did when you were alone. This isn't marriage. This is a mausoleum of who you used to be. And yet, you smile for the family photos. You hold hands in public. You play the game wearing the mask while a part of you withers in silence, wondering if this is the price of love or the cost of self-betrayal. Jung once said, people will do anything, no matter how absurd, to avoid facing their own souls. And marriage, more than any other institution, becomes the stage where this absurdity unfolds. It's where two unexamined lives collide, not to liberate each other, but to trap each other in a shared dream of safety where truth becomes too dangerous to speak aloud. Because truth shatters illusions. And illusions are all that many marriages have left. You see, most people don't want to be loved. They want to be worshipped, admired, coddled, protected from the mirror. They don't want a partner. They want an accomplice in their avoidance. But the soul, it starves in such arrangements. It craves confrontation. It demands authenticity. It seeks out relationships that strip you bare, not dress you up. But society never taught us this. It taught us to seek compatibility, not depths, stability, not transformation. And so we marry our comfort zone, then spend the next 20 years resenting it. Not because the partner changed, but because we never allowed ourselves to. We chose the illusion of safety over the risk of self-actualization. We chose tradition over evolution. We chose silence over truth. But silence is not peace. It's the slow decay of your voice, your needs, your truth, until you no longer recognize yourself, even in the presence of someone who once made your heart race. This is the silent prison, not built by abuse, but by avoidance, not enforced by force, but by fear. The fear of what would happen if you finally spoke the truth. I'm not happy, I'm not seen, I'm not alive in this. That sentence alone has the power to liberate or destroy. And most people would rather rot than risk it, because we've mistaken longevity for success. But a 30-year sentence is still a sentence, even if you both smile in front of the kids. And so the marriage becomes a museum of old photos and broken dreams. The home becomes a mausoleum of who you were before you stopped trying. And love becomes a memory, not a presence. But here's the awakening. Your soul was never designed for such quiet desperation. It was meant to burn, to speak, to shatter false selves and demand depth, even if that depth comes at the cost of comfort. Because the only real marriage is the one where both people are free to grow, free to speak, free to change, even if that change terrifies the other. Without that freedom, you are not in a marriage, you are in a performance. A lifelong audition for someone else's approval, instead of a sacred rebellion toward your own becoming. And the question is, how long will you keep playing the role? How long will you betray yourself in the name of keeping something whole that is already broken? And how long will you pretend that silence is love, when deep down you know it's the graveyard of it? You want to know why most marriages become silent prisons? Because most people were never taught to love. They were only taught to attach, to cling, to bind themselves to the nearest warm body and call it destiny. But love isn't possession. It isn't tradition. It isn't the white dress or the mortgage or the Sunday dinners. Love is evolution. And evolution demands risk. It demands death, the death of the false self, the death of fantasy, the death of control. Only then can two souls meet not as prisoners of their past, but as warriors of their truth. And until you are ready for that death, marriage will always feel like a cage. Even if the world calls it success, even if your friends are jealous, even if you've got the perfect photos on the wall, because deep down, your soul knows the truth. It always has. And it will keep whispering louder and louder until you either answer the call or bury it beneath another decade of silence. The time is now. Burn the mask. Because the only prison you ever lived in was your refusal to face the truth. And the truth is brutal. It's not poetic, it's not romantic, it doesn't come with violins in the background or candlelit epiphanies. It comes in moments of stillness when the kids are asleep, the dishes are done, and there's nothing left to distract you from the void sitting beside you on the couch. That's when it hits. The eerie feeling that you're living with someone you once knew and now only manage. You manage their moods, their silence, their outbursts, their absence. You manage their presence like a project, not a person. You walk on eggshells, not because they're dangerous, but because the illusion you've built is so fragile that one honest conversation could reduce it to rubble. And so you avoid, you defer, you silence your own voice to maintain the comfort of the lie. But there's no peace in that comfort. Only a low-grade existential ache, the kind you can't explain to anyone without sounding ungrateful. Because how do you tell the world I'm drowning when they only see the surface? The smiles, the vacations, the anniversaries. You don't. You just keep drowning quietly, hoping your partner will notice, or at least that the numbness will protect you from caring. But you care. You care so deeply it hurts. And that hurt has nowhere to go. So it calcifies into bitterness, into sarcasm, into passive-aggressive jabs during dinner, into long silences filled with everything you're too afraid to say, until your love language becomes avoidance, until your connection becomes logistics, until your intimacy becomes a ghost that visits once a year only to remind you of what you've lost. This is not love. This is a slow spiritual erosion. And yet, we justify it. We say, every marriage has its ups and downs. We say, it's just a phase. We say, at least we're not like them. But comparison is not salvation. It's just a more palatable version of denial. Because deep down, you know, this is not a phase, it's a pattern. It's been repeating for years. You've adapted, you've lowered your standards, you've rewritten the definition of love to fit your reality. But love was never meant to be redefined. It was meant to be rediscovered. Rediscovered in truth, in growth, in courage, in confronting the parts of yourself you've hidden to keep someone else comfortable. Because love doesn't grow in silence. It grows in the fire of vulnerability, in saying, this is who I really am. Can you still meet me here? But few have the strength for that. Because that kind of love doesn't guarantee comfort. It guarantees transformation. And transformation is terrifying when you've built your identity around someone else's approval. But the truth is, until you confront your fear of losing them, you will never truly find yourself. And that's the paradox of marriage. The more you cling, the more it slips. The more you fear the truth, the more it rots. The more you pretend, the more it dies. You don't need a new partner. You need a new relationship with yourself. Because the version of you who accepted this silent prison is not the highest version of you. It's the version trained by fear, trained to compromise before expressing, to please before feeling, to endure before confronting. That version of you needs to die. Not because it was wrong, but because it was surviving, not living, and your soul is tired of surviving. It wants to speak, to scream, to stretch out of the box it was placed in by culture, tradition, and childhood wounds. It wants to be seen not for what it provides, but for what it is. And here's the reckoning. If your marriage cannot hold that truth, then it was never a sacred bond. It was a silent contract written in fear, signed in need, maintained in shame. Real love says, change, grow, evolve. Even if it terrifies me, even if it leaves me behind, I'd rather see your soul than keep you caged. That is the love worth bleeding for. But that love is rare, because most people don't want your truth. They want your compliance. And so we shrink, we wear the mask, we smile through the pain, until one day the mask becomes our face, and we forget who we were before the world told us what marriage was supposed to be. But the soul remembers. It remembers the wildness, the depth, the rage, the poetry. It remembers the version of you who wanted more than safety, the version who burned for meaning, for rawness, for sacred connection. And the soul will not stop whispering until you return, even if it means burning down everything that kept you silent, even if it means becoming the villain in someone else's story, even if it means walking alone for a while, not because you don't deserve love, but because you finally do. Because the love that lets you abandon yourself is not love. It's bondage dressed in vows. And freedom, real freedom, begins the moment you say, no more silence, no more pretending, no more performance. If I have to burn this mask to remember who I am, so be it. That's not rebellion. That's resurrection. That's the death of the quiet prisoner and the return of the sovereign soul. And that soul, your soul, was never meant to live in a silent prison. It was meant to roar. It was meant to rage against the walls of domesticated despair. Because what you call marriage today is often not union. It is sedation, a tranquilized version of life where love is managed like a calendar appointment and desire is negotiated like a ceasefire, where the ritual of togetherness becomes a routine of avoidance. You ask why marriages fall into silence? Because silence is safe when words might ignite a fire you can no longer contain. Because it's easier to become roommates with shared responsibilities than two souls dancing naked in emotional truth. Because somewhere along the line you traded your fire for predictability. You traded honesty for harmony. You traded your becoming for belonging. And the world applauded you for it. It said, look at them, still together, as if survival is synonymous with sacredness. But survival is not sacred. It is instinct. It is default. It is what happens when you bury your truth beneath years of compromise, until it forms a mountain of resentment too heavy to move. And now, you call that mountain marriage. But it's not. It's mourning. A slow mourning of who you were before you learned to accept a half-lived life. The tragedy is not divorce. The tragedy is staying. Staying when you've outgrown the story. Staying when your truth has become too dangerous to voice. Staying when the cost of pretending has begun to outweigh the comfort of staying silent. Because marriage without evolution is incarceration. And yet we cling, not because we are committed to love, but because we are addicted to the identity that comes with it. We stay for the label, for the illusion of being chosen, for the fear of being alone. But being alone is not the worst fate. Being unseen while lying next to someone every night, that is the real abyss. That is where souls go to die quietly, to calcify into bitterness, to perform happiness for others while grieving themselves in private. And yet, the soul whispers still. It whispers in the late night scrolls, in the hollow arguments, in the fantasies of escape you never tell anyone about. It whispers, this is not who you are. It doesn't whisper divorce, it whispers truth. Because truth doesn't always mean separation. Sometimes it means resurrection. But only if both are willing to unearth the lies. Only if both are willing to die to who they've been pretending to be. Only if both are courageous enough to face the fire of authenticity and say, I don't know how we got here, but I don't want to stay here. That one sentence can save a marriage. Not by preserving the illusion, but by burning it to the ground so something real can rise from the ashes. But most are too afraid. Afraid of the grief, afraid of the guilt, afraid of what others will think. So they stay in the silent prison, decorating the cell with family portraits and annual vacations, mistaking motion for meaning. But inside, the soul knows There is no intimacy without risk, no love without truth, no future without fire. And you were born of fire. You were never meant to adapt to numbness. You were never meant to die quietly inside a performance someone else wrote for you. You are the storm. You are the flame. You are the unspoken sentence that could change everything if only you let it breathe. So speak. Speak the truth you've buried beneath years of pretending. Speak the desire you've muted to keep the peace. Speak the rage, the grief, the hunger. Speak it all. Not to destroy, but to resurrect. Because some things must die for love to be reborn. And if your marriage cannot hold that truth, then it is not worthy of the word. Let them call you selfish. Let them call you crazy. Let them call you whatever makes them comfortable. But don't let them call you silent. Not anymore. Because the silence you've been living in is not peace, it's self-abandonment. And the time has come to choose your voice over their comfort. To choose your soul over their expectations. To choose truth, even if it costs you everything that was built on a lie. Because that is the path of the awakened. The path of the sovereign. The path of the one who refuses to spend another year dying inside a dream that became a cage. Burn it. Not in hatred, but in reverence. Not in bitterness, but in awakening. Burn the mask. Burn the script. Burn the house of mirrors where you lost yourself. And from those ashes, let the real union begin. Not with someone else, but with yourself. Because only when you marry your truth can love finally become liberation. And liberation does not arrive with applause. It arrives with silence, the real kind, not the suffocating silence of repression, but the sacred stillness after the storm. The kind of silence where you finally hear your own heartbeat again, where you meet your reflection without flinching, where the air tastes different, because for the first time in years, it is free of the poison of pretense. You thought the danger was in the confrontation, but the real danger was in the continuation of the lie, of the compromise, of the soul-shrinking rituals you called routine. You were never afraid of losing them. You were afraid of finding yourself, because that would mean undoing everything that once made you feel safe. But what you called safety was a sedative, a pacifier for your deeper knowing. And now the knowing is louder than ever. You can't go back, not because they changed, not because you hate them, but because the version of you that entered that marriage no longer exists. And that's the part no one warns you about. That real growth means you will outgrow the life you built in your sleep. You will wake up one day and realize that you've surrounded yourself with things that fit the mask, not the soul. You realize that the vows you made were not to a person, but to an identity, and now that identity is disintegrating. You're not leaving a marriage. You're leaving a mirage. You're walking away from the roles you rehearsed so well that they became muscle memory. But muscle memory isn't love. It's just repetition. And love, real love, is not repetition. It's revelation. It's when two people stand naked in their evolution and say, I see you now, not who you were, not who I wanted you to be, but who you are and who you're becoming. And if your marriage cannot hold that seeing, then it is not a sanctuary, it's a stage. And you were cast in it long ago as the loyal spouse, the agreeable partner, the perfect parent. But your soul doesn't want a role. It wants a revolution. And revolutions are messy. They cost you comfort. They cost you reputation. They cost you every illusion you built to survive. But what they give you is yourself. Not the self who nods and smiles and serves others at the expense of her own aliveness. Not the self who hides behind I'm fine while bleeding inside. Not the self who translates their rage into politeness, their pain into productivity, their needs into negotiations. But the self who says, I'm done. Done performing, done appeasing, done pretending. Because silence has a cost. And the cost is your soul. And no relationship, no vow, no social expectation is worth that. So yes, let them be shocked. Let them be confused. Let them call it a midlife crisis, a phase, a betrayal. Let them say whatever they need to say to make sense of your awakening. But you don't owe them an explanation. You owe yourself your freedom. And that freedom begins with one sentence. This is no longer my truth. Say it, not for the drama, not for the exit, but for the return to yourself. Because the marriage you were promised was never supposed to be a sentence. It was supposed to be a sanctuary. And if it has become anything else, then it is not love you're protecting, it's fear. And fear is not a foundation. Fear is a cage. But cages don't hold souls forever. Not yours. Because your soul remembers. It remembers the younger you, the wilder you, the dreamer, the rebel, the fierce, untamed essence that once burned before the world taught you to dim. That self is not gone. It's buried beneath years of pleasing, surviving, performing. But it's not dead. It's waiting for the crack, for the slip, for the moment when the mask breaks just wide enough for the truth to leak through. And here it is. This moment, right now, the moment you decide not just to see the prison, but to leave it. Not with bitterness, not with blame, but with a sacred rage that says, I will not die here, because life is not meant to be endured. It is meant to be devoured with fire in your lungs and blood in your voice. And you were born for more than silence. You were born to burn through the lies, the roles, the conditioning, the chains, to burn so brightly that even your shadows become sacred. And from those flames rise, not as a wife, not as a husband, not as anyone's possession or project, but as the wild, sovereign soul itself you were always meant to be, unmasked, unchained, unapologetically whole. And now there's nothing left to hold on to. No more excuses, no more hoping they'll change, no more clinging to the fantasy that if you just endure a little longer, happiness will find its way back. Because happiness is not something you wait for. It's something you reclaim, something you choose, something you defend with your voice, with your courage, with the decision to never again betray your soul for the comfort of silence. Look in the mirror deep, direct, without flinching, and ask, am I alive, or am I just existing to preserve a hollow image? Do I still love, or am I just afraid of letting go of a shared past? Am I still myself, or have I become the final role society finds acceptable? And if the answer hurts, that's the signal that the prison door is open. No one is holding you captive, except the quiet compromise you've been repeating every single day. But now you're awake. Now, you see, and once the soul sees the truth, it cannot unsee. It can only move forward, out of the long night, out of the curtain of false acceptance, to live once and fully as yourself. The woman who needs no one to keep her, the man who no longer has to fake strength to survive. We were not born to endure each other. We were born to awaken each other. And if they cannot walk with you in your becoming, then it was never love. It was delay dressed in affection. So burn the mask you've worn for too long. Don't wait for them to understand. Don't wait for society to approve. You don't need anyone's permission to be free. You just need to choose. Choose yourself. Choose your soul. Choose the truth even if it shakes the foundation of everything you once called home. Because in the end, the only thing worse than losing someone is losing yourself in silence. And you were not born to be silent. You were born to live, to love, to burn, like the untamed flame that was never meant to be domesticated by fear. Let them say what they will. Let them call you selfish. Let them misunderstand. But you must understand this. Freedom is not abandonment. It is return. And you have returned. At last,